friends. And that was really one of the differences between men and women in marriage, that women had their friends they could talk to. They had female friends, and when they didn't have their men, that wasn't a big problem. But men tended to rely on their wives for their social networks, for their ties, for their social life. And when they lost their women, then they were really alone and isolated. So there's some good lessons there to be learned.
Well, I think so. And, and maybe, too, because of the man, whether he's going through a divorce or not, seems to have more pressure on him to deliver. It's, even though it's a society now of both men and women working in the household, the guy is still relied on to bring in most of the bread and butter. And maybe he can't take that.
Well, I think that's true. Sometimes it's the pressures of the workplace. But again, the people who were involved in successful careers, that was protective for them, even if they were demanding careers. We found again and again in the Longevity Project that people who could relate well to other people and help other people, whether sometimes it was religion that helped them, sometimes it was social clubs, sometimes it was volunteering, a lot of times it was volunteering. In fact, I just read an obituary of one of the Terman participants who just died recently. And when after he retired, he spent decades reading recordings for the blind, and he actually read the most recordings of anyone has ever done into his 90s. So if you can do things and you're involved with other people and making a difference in the world, it's kind of a good news story that helps your own health as well.
All right, give us some tips on what we can do to either change our lifestyle or temper it a little bit in order to live a little longer, based on your study.
Well, of course, I have to tell you, get the book and look at the examples in there. There are quizzes in there. You can plot your own trajectories and see what kind of pathway you're on. And then you have to individualize it for you. So there are some things that are true in general, but some things are particular for the person. So when Mark Twain turned 70, he said, "I've never taken any exercise except sleeping and resting, and I never intend to take any. Exercise is loathsome." So, he said what's good for me is not good for you, and what's good for you is not necessarily good for me. So that's the first thing, is to kind of understand what you've been doing and where you're going. If you can gradually increase your activity levels, that's good. If you've already are really active and you've been falling off, then you see something you need to do there as well. Probably the single most important thing, though, people could do is examine who they're interacting with, who they're associating with, and the quality of those relationships. So that's something that any of us could do. We could say, this friend is trouble. I'm gonna get away from that person. This group I don't really like. These other people, on the other hand, they're healthy. They make me feel good, and that's the group I'm going to spend more time with. So if I had to, give you one particular bit of advice that generalizes across people, that would probably be it.
You've got a assessment quiz on your website, Howard, of course, and let's go through some of the points, and you can just quickly explain them to us. Are you conscientious in a health-relevant sense? Explain that.
Well, the biggest predictor of longevity and health longevity in childhood and in adulthood was being prudent, being planful, and being persistent. And persistent is the one that I like the best, because it turns out there's a lot of forks in the road in your life, and the ones who can kind of stick with their goals, that had health benefits. It helped them with their relationships, and it helped them with their careers, but it also helped them with their health. So, if you tend to be a person who can't persist on things, that's something you need to think about and, maybe do something about.
Next up, do you have a sociable personality? Are you a good emotional communicator?
Well, the emotional communication is really essential for a lot of people. You don't have to be sociable and the life of the party. We found that extroverts were not necessarily the longest living, but you have to be able to relate on some level with other people. So, like you said, there is a scale there that gives you some sense of your emotional sociability and how you relate to others. And there are things you can do to improve that. Some of it is just trying to express your emotions a little bit more. And there's increasing evidence that people who open up a little bit often do quite well in terms of their relations with other people and then in terms of their health.
Next up, are you a moody worrier?
Well, yeah, we didn't talk too much about that yet, but that's really interesting too. We found, contrary to what we were expecting and what everybody always says, that worrying was often quite good for your health. So if you, especially if you were kind of persistent and conscientious, and you would worry about things, that turned out to be health protective. We looked, for example, at men who lost their wives, they were widowers, and if you faced a stress like that and you didn't worry, you were doomed. It was the men who said, wait a minute, I'm alone now. I'm under this difficult situation. I need to take better care of myself. Those people stayed healthier and thrived. So we're not saying everybody should live their life going through worrying about everything, but we also think it's bad advice that everybody's always hearing. Don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, don't sweat anything. Right. It's really, don't sweat the small stuff, but the big stuff, it's really important to sweat.
We talked about the gloomy Chicken Little, but let's rehash that again.
Okay, well, people who catastrophize, who think when one thing happens that every bad thing is going to happen, that's really bad for your health, especially makes you more prone to depression and more prone to get into violent accidents, be involved in homicide or suicide. So if you're like that, or you know somebody who's like that, every time one little thing happens, they think the world is coming to an end, everything's terrible. Those are thought processes that can be changed. So the good news there is it's just how you think about things, and people can learn to think about things in a more positive way.
Now, what do you mean by did your early education predispose you to long life?
Well, one of the findings that we looked at is what year the determined participants in the longevity project started school. So they were bright kids, and some of the parents, like some parents today, they say, I'm going to give my kid a real head start and start them earlier so they'll be able to get ahead in life and, accomplish much more. So we looked if they started school at age 6 or before, first grade formal schooling at age 6, like most students do, or they, the parents pushed them in a little earlier, age 4 or even age 5, and it turned out to be a predictor of problems. If you started school in formal classroom setting before age 6, like first grade and at age 5, you were much more likely to die throughout the rest of your life as you became an adult. It set in motion a whole bunch of things. You didn't relate well to your classmates, but also we know now that young children need time for themselves to play, to do unstructured activities. So that's the nice thing about the Longevity Project. We can look at things that they were doing early in life and, like what age they started school. And if you did start school and you always felt out of place in your school, that's a risk factor, and you need to, I think through what your habits are these days and what your social relationships are like.
And are you satisfied with your life in a way that impacts your health? Explain that.
Well, that refers to the cases of people who faced early life challenges and stresses. So if your parents got divorced or if other things happened. Interestingly, if one of your parents died when you were young, it wasn't as much of a threat for your health. Of course, it was sad, and nobody appreciated that, but it didn't affect their health like divorce did. But if you got to a point in your life, even in your 20s, where you thought you were on the right path, you were satisfied with what you were accomplishing, you could have relationships with people, then you're probably going to stay healthy. And so that assessment in the Longevity Project book lets you evaluate where you are on that dimension.
We've talked about, of course, masculine or feminine and your health based on your job and things like that. But you also mentioned here religion. Why is that important?
Well, there's a lot of studies that show that religious people tend to live longer, especially religious women tend to live longer. And we were curious about that, so we wanted to see, first of all, if that was true in the determined participants in the Longevity Project, and we did find that the women who were more religious, and it could be things about how many religious books they read and how much they went to church and how much they said they were religious. But then we wanted to figure out why. Was it the prayer? Some people think prayer is the key to health. And we found that it wasn't the organized religious observance per se that was so important. The reason the religious women lived longer? Well, two kinds of things. One is, first of all, they tended to be healthier habits. So, the people who were more religious tended to, be less likely to smoke and to drink and all the obvious kinds of things. But the really interesting thing was that the people who were involved in organized religions often had good social ties. So they saw a lot of people each day. They were involved in helping other people. A lot of religions encourage you to volunteer. And that turned out to be the key to their long life. So it was also true that other people who were not religious or involved with religions but did the same kinds of things, were helpful to other people and involved with other people, they also lived long. So it wasn't the prayer per se, but religion for a lot of people did help them stay healthier.
Okay, so was there anything that surprised you that went contrary to what your own belief systems might have been before you got all the results in?
Well, almost everything was surprising. We didn't really expect most of this to come out the way it did. I think one of the things that got me thinking personally was because we found that people who stayed active and stayed involved lived long, that a lot of advice about retirement is bad advice. So you hear, a lot of people want to think, I just got to get away from my job. I'm going to go sit on a beach in Hawaii, and then everything will be perfect in the world. Well, I think a lot more now about, retirement, and is that such a good thing? And I think it's not. For a lot of baby boomers who are rushing to retirement, they should think twice. If it's going to take you away from your friends and away from the kind of work you like, probably not a great thing for your health to rush off and retire. On the other hand, if you get involved in some activities where you're helpful to other people and you're going to spend your time doing something like that you really don't have enough time for right now, then that probably is going to be good for your health. So there are a lot of issues about retirement that really was surprising and really make me and my friends think a lot about that.
Okay, absolutely. Well, you've done a great job with it. Now, what do you do with it? You've put it into the book form, of course, but do you present it to any special journals, medical journals, anything like that?
Oh yeah, there are already over 50 scientific publications that we've done that come out of this project.
Right.
And there are hundreds of talks and posters and presentations at scientific conferences. And the point of the book was to bring it to a broader audience, your listeners and other people around the world. So maybe some of the health policy people will start thinking more broadly about some of these really important issues that affect the public health.
All right. Well, you stay with us. We've got a final hour to go with you, Howard, and we're going to take phone calls, maybe even stories, people with their own personalities and what they think has affected their own lifestyle. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM.